And welcome to Sponsorship in a Pandemic, how to get the most from sponsorship in 2021. The question that I have been asking myself in my role. So what I'll cover today is a little bit about me, sponsorship within the marketing mix, activation in a pandemic, how, what, where, and planning ahead. Let's get started. So my name's Helena Barras. I have 15 years in experience in multi-channel marketing. I'm a specialist in sponsorship activation. I've worked with quite a few sports properties, and now I'm currently working with Newcastle Building Society on their sponsorship agenda. I have created multi-award winning campaigns. I'm a chartered marketer. I've worked from big global FTSE 100s right into startups, and all of it's been really good for my career, really good learning experience. It's given me a good breadth of experience. I have a master's in marketing, which I got in 2009, so it seems like a long time ago, but I can still feel the pain of trying to study whilst I worked. And my LinkedIn is linkedin.com/Helena Barras if you wanted to check me out on there. You can also ask me any questions on there by direct messaging me or posting on my wall, or you can go to Twitter and I'm at Helena Barras on there. But there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end as well. So let's jump into sponsorship in the marketing mix. Evaluating your mix in 2021, because it looks a lot different from 2019 and slightly different from 2020, at least the start. So I guess what you're thinking, maybe if you're a marketer considering your mix and where sponsorship fits, is you might be a bit confused about where it really does fit and whether it fits at all anymore. Should you redistribute your sponsorship budget elsewhere in the mix? You'll be asking yourself these types of questions. Has sponsorship lost some of its potency within the pandemic environment, which ultimately leads you to question, is sponsorship still worth it? Let's dive right in. So, is sponsorship still worth it? You need to ask yourself, why did you get into it? Why did you get into sponsorship in the first place? What part of your strategy was sponsorship supporting? And that will lead you to be able to evaluate. That's the first step in being able to evaluate the value of sponsorship within the pandemic. Because if you've got nothing else in your mix that can fulfill the objectives that sponsorship was filling, then you need to find a way to make sponsorship work for you. Now, some sponsorships will work fine in the pandemic. If you're sponsoring programs, soaps or anything like that on the TV, that probably hasn't been impacted too badly by the pandemic. So what I'm referring to here is rights that involve a lot of live events, and that's a big chunk of how you would connect to your audiences that you're trying to reach through your sponsorship. So you can't reach them that way, but can you reach them another way? Frame the problem, frame it through your strategy. Look at your marketing strategy. Again, this is coming back to why did you get into it? What have you got in your mix? And potentially it might be that you are able to pull back on some of your sponsorship budget and reinvest it elsewhere. It could be poor value against other parts of the mix, especially in a cheap media market with offline deflating. But bear in mind, there's a reason offline has deflated a little bit in price. Footfall and eyeballs has gone down because there's less movement of people within the lockdowns. Take a step back and reevaluate. Go back to your goals. This is what I keep banging on about. Can they be better achieved elsewhere, such as outdoor, digital? Are you unable to achieve the goals through activation? You can't do the live activation for the most part, I think, certainly if you're a UK based marketer. So what can you do instead, and will it be as effective, or can you do something else that's totally not sponsorship related? Revisit why you entered into the sponsorship, and what's appropriate in the climate and for your brand should you reposition. So for some of this, I'm going to skew away from sponsorship a little bit and just talk about the things that some businesses have done. So some businesses have used the pandemic to show that they are a force for good, and have tried to do things that are more in keeping with the theme of all being in it together. So things like paying back furlough money and advertising that, things like offering up your premises as vaccination centres or test centres. These are all things that enhance the brand. They might not be directly related to sponsorship, but they're good examples of switching, repositioning, and being able to tell your brand story. And that's what you need to do with your sponsorship activation plan. So although that's not sponsorship, there are some lessons to be taken from that approach. Being in it together being one of them. My employer, we are always generally focused on our purpose. So the sponsorship's no exception. The purpose is to connect communities for a better financial future. So we were well positioned to help out in the pandemic with our sponsorship and grant giving. So we were able to focus in on COVID relief. But that doesn't mean that a brand that had been focusing in on sports sponsorship couldn't get behind something else. For example, anybody who's connected to Manchester United could support Marcus Rashford's campaign on free school meals. There's plenty of causes out there that you could align with your brand and sponsorship plans. Activating your sponsorship. How, what, where? Now, this has been the most challenging thing, I think. Not least because of the issue of reaching and engaging with an audience. For me, the reason you would use sponsorship in your marketing mix is because it's not interruptive like advertising. It's more personal, and you are reaching you're increasing the reach of your audience, but you're also reaching them in a way that is more in line with their passions. It's going to make more of an emotional connection. And these things usually happen at a live event. You can make a stronger emotional connection over a live event, something where emotions might run high, like a sporting event. Doing it online does lose some of its potency, but does it lose some of its reach when people are at home? Arguably, many might be on furlough with time to kill, so they may be scrolling through digital. So you might find that your reach is acceptable or even beyond what you were hoping for. However, the quality of the connection is something that you really need to work on in terms of being creative and making sure that your brand is associated with those rights. So an example might be Visa. They got very creative with their sponsorship of the Toronto International Film Festival because it had to happen virtually, so they created drive-in movie experiences for fans. So that's really good that Visa put that on. It creates that warm emotion towards the brand for creating a nice experience for fans of film, and helps position Visa as a brand to be associated with that. The content conundrum. So I was trying to look for a conundrum, like a photography example of a countdown conundrum that showed photography was the conundrum, but I couldn't. So I don't actually know the answer to this conundrum. If anybody does, tweet me at _Helena Barras. Tell me what that is. But the content conundrum is a hard one. If you can't get live film and photography, we all know that creates better engagement as pieces of content on digital. So this is a challenge in itself. I'm busy creating collateral at the moment that requires photography of customers, which I can't get. So I'm having to repurpose things that we have already in. We don't want to use stock photography. And so it's a real challenge, actually, and one that shouldn't be underestimated. Organising a photo shoot within lockdown, or even when restrictions are lifted but we're still under some sort of restrictions, is probably an even bigger challenge. But this one's a tough one, so you want to think laterally. Think about making animated infographics. What other formats of content can you create? Are you happy with selfies or home created content? User generated content. See what you can achieve from that, is my advice. I'm still sort of navigating my way through this conundrum, but there are a few ideas out there, user generated content being one of them. Trying some animated infographics, that kind of thing, maybe CGI depending on what products and services you're in, although that can be quite expensive. And I'm also looking at different formats. Just don't immediately jump straight to digital. Oh, it's going to have to be social that we activate on, and it's going to have to be our website, and that's it. That's not true. There is another channel that might have been overlooked in home. So what do we do at home as well as scroll through our phones like this couple are doing? Hopefully we talk to each other. These two don't look like they're very engaged with each other. However, there's a lot of content that you consume at home, and for me, one of the big ones that I've been consuming in lockdown, and I'm not alone, is podcasts. So as well as your digital, as well as your TV, which is expensive. So you've got digital, which is crowded, noisy. There are challenges around creating standout content on there with regard to getting original photography and filming. It's very expensive to do TV-led campaigns. So what about podcasts? What about podcasts? Well, podcasts are a brilliant way to bring to life your sponsorship, especially if it's rights holding with any sort of arts or sport, because if you've got appearance days in your contract or any kind of rights that allow you access to the experts, to the players, to the managers, to the artists, then this is a golden opportunity to do some recorded audio content. You probably need a picture to go with it when you push it out on social, so you're still not getting away from that problem. But if it is somebody who is in the public eye, they are likely to have some decent library of headshots and action shots even. So think about what you could create on podcasts. 7.1 million people listen to podcasts in the UK, which is a rise of 24% year on year from 2019. So that's 2020's stats according to Ofcom. So that is a real opportunity. I know this forum's very much about digital, and you will have to drive people to your podcasts through digital, but I really think that you are missing a trick if you miss out on podcasts and audio content. So how do you emerge from the pandemic? Planning ahead. This is a really hard question to answer because we don't know what will happen. For me, I'm planning sort of quite tight for 3 months, looser type of plans with a few assumptions for out to 6 months. and then 12 months, big assumptions and quite wide-ranging scenarios. So that's the way I've cut my cloth. You might want to do it slightly differently. It's very difficult to know what's going to happen with the speed of vaccination, what's going to happen with mutations of the virus. God forbid we have one that's resistant to the vaccine, but you never know. So it's too hard. Back in the beginning of 2020, Walk wrote a report saying that sponsorship was predicted to rise 5% year on year, the strongest growth in a decade, and attributed a lot of that to the Tokyo Olympics. Now, we all know what's happened. Two Circles subsequently have published a report saying that there has been a 37% decrease in sports sponsorship in the wake of the pandemic. So you can't predict where we're going to go, but what you can control is your own strategy, your own reaction to the pandemic, your own proactive approach to shuffling your marketing mix or repositioning your sponsorship assets and activation plan. And that is the best that anyone can ask of you. Thank you for your time. Any questions, I'm happy to answer.